Hi, I'm that Astro chap, and I've been waiting for a clear night for approximately 3 months. It's been raining non-stop, basically, since the beginning of the year. I think in January I made a few videos where I managed to actually get the telescope outside for a while and capture some data. But since then, every single night without failure, it's been cloudy or raining, or the visibility has been poor, and there's just been no opportunity to do astrophotography. Even to me, someone who's been in the UK for my entire life, it surprises me how much cloud we can actually have in the UK. So as soon as there is a clear night, I do still plan to actually use the ASI 662 MC Pro, MC planetary camera, which is attached to my telescope, and capture first light with it. I think we are now at a point where there's not going to be much opportunity to do anything with planets. So the best option is going to be to actually try and do something with the moon instead. But as and when the weather clears up, and I don't know when that's going to be, I will share that video with you. So in the meantime, I've been doing other things, mostly around planning. So I've ordered some new gear, which is pretty exciting. I'm not going to share the details of that now, but I will do that in a subsequent video, probably within the next couple of weeks. So aside from that, other little things that I've been doing, I've been thinking about just trying to make my life easier for when I can get back to imaging. So I have purchased a couple of bits. So one is this. So this is the SanDisk 256 gig flash drive, and this will replace the one that comes as standard in the ASI Air, which is a 64 gig one. And it just means that each night after a bunch of imaging, I don't need to take the memory card out, the flash drive out, download all the images onto my computer, wipe it, and then put it back in. With this being like 4 times the size, I can just put it in, run for multiple consecutive nights, and then when I finish the imaging, I can take it all off at the end. The other thing I've done is just upgraded where I actually store my photos. So this is the SanDisk external flash drive. So I've been using flash drives in the past for storing all of the FITS files that I capture. I don't store any of like registered or calibrated or anything like that, but I do store the originals in case I ever want to go back to them and try reprocessing them or add data to them. As for today's video, what I want to do is do something slightly different, which I haven't really done before, and that's talk about guiding and how to achieve rounder stars in your images. So for anyone that's been doing astrophotography for a while, you'll likely know that guiding is one of the most important aspects, and there are a few key tips and tricks that people can employ to help improve guiding. So in the last few years since I've been doing it, I've been trying to work on that technique and get it to a point where my guiding is improved and I see a reduction in the tracking error. And I want to share some of the tips that I've come up with and things that have worked well for me that perhaps will be beneficial to you if you're coming new to the hobby, or even if you've been doing astrophotography for a while. There might be some things in there that either you haven't thought about or may also benefit you in some way. So with that, let's jump in and go through my top 5 tips on how to improve guiding. So tip number 1 is to do with the mount, and you kind of need to ask yourself the question, do you have a big payload? So if you have a mount that can support your payload, then that's great, but you should check. So if you're overloading the mount, basically, the weight of the gear that you're putting on top of it is going to be a problem. So with the mount, it's obviously going to be tracking the night sky, and there's a motor that sits within it. If you overload it past the point of imaging payload capacity, it's going to be tugging the mount one way or the other throughout the entire night, and your guiding software is going to be fighting, the motor is going to be fighting. As a result, there's going to be some instability in the images you can capture, and as a result, you're probably going to have bad frames which need to be discarded, or you're going to have elongated stars. So tip number 1 is quite straightforward. Read the manufacturer specs for your mount and stay well within your imaging payload capacity. Tip number 2, so this is to do with polar alignment. So make sure that you actually spend that extra bit of time getting polar aligned at the beginning of the night as accurately as you possibly can. It's one of the things that makes actually a really big difference, more so than some of the other tips that I'm going to mention. But the more precise you can be with the polar alignment, the easier it is for your guiding software to actually track the night sky. And as a result, you're going to have less errors, and your resulting images will benefit from it. So spend a few extra minutes at the beginning of the night, get it right, and then it'll pay dividends throughout the course of the night. So if you're like me and you just want to get up and running imaging really quickly, then you're probably going to be cutting corners and not doing this as well as you could do. And it's to do with your mount as well. So leveling the mount and making sure that everything is balanced is so important. And again, similar reasons, you're going to be fighting, or your mount is going to be fighting an uphill battle the entire night if it's not balanced and it's not leveled properly. Your best bet is to put the mount out first. Don't put the mount head on. Level it with a tripod. So I've done this in the past, but I don't always take the mount head off. I try to level it on the 3 legs to get it as best I can. I should take the mount off. Like it's a shortcut, but it works for me. I would recommend taking it off, do it properly, then put the mount head back on. And then once you've done that and you're happy everything is level, at that point you can put all of your gear on top of the mount, and make sure you put everything on. So if you've got a guide cam or a guide scope, or if you've got an ASI Air or any other attachments, filter wheels, whatever it may be, make sure you put all of it on there before you do your balancing. So if you don't balance with all of the gear, you're kind of wasting your time, because it's not representative of what's actually going to be there when you're like midway through your imaging session. So spend the time, get that right, get it balanced. You should be able to pivot the telescope in any direction, and it should basically stay there, that's the goal that you're aiming for. So that's it. Make sure you level and balance your mount, and you will see benefits as well. Tip number 4, so this is for ASI Air users. This is something that I saw a really big benefit off the back of. It was one of the biggest improvements that I actually noticed, and it's a really easy to address issue that I just wasn't aware of, honestly. I'd seen the buttons, but I'd never played with them. I didn't really even think much about them being there, honestly, until I saw another video, and I can't remember who it was, so I can't give them the credit for it. But they recommended this, and it's a great tip. It really does make a difference. So if you're using the ASI Air, in the app you'll notice that you get your graph at the bottom, and I'll put it up here, and you've got 2 sets of buttons. So there's the RA AG settings and the DEC AG settings. And you've got a plus and minus button, and there's a percentage that sits there. If you adjust those values, you're going to be altering the level of aggression of which corrections are made to your guiding. So if you're in a situation where you've got your graph bouncing up and down and up and down and up and down and crossing the axis constantly with big swings, you're probably overcorrecting, and you need to reduce that aggression number slightly. Conversely, if you've got a case where the guidelines are kind of just drifting off and then gradually pulling back, drifting off and then gradually pulling back, you're likely undercorrecting, so you probably want to bump those values up. And if you adjust them and get it just right, you should see that it should start to smooth out a little bit, and it stays closer to the main axis, which is what you're aiming for. And as a result, you obviously have less error in guiding. Now, that alone isn't going to work. You do need to do the previous steps to make sure that you're as good a setup as you can from a hardware perspective before you start worrying about the guiding software, because otherwise the guiding software is just trying to compensate for those issues. And then the final tip is tip number 5, which is to do with your guide scope. If you're using a separate guide scope, then it's worth spending a one-off cost, and it really is one-off, assuming you leave it mounted together, to make sure that the guide scope is pointed directly at the same point as your main imaging telescope. It doesn't take a lot of time, it doesn't take a lot of effort, and it's not going to make the biggest difference. It is minor, but it can have a little effect if you're focusing on a completely different area of the night sky to what you're imaging, and your tracking is based on that. It's unlikely to cause you massive issues, but for such a simple, easy to address thing, it's worthwhile investing that time in it and get it right. These are my top 5 tips on how to improve guiding. I hope you found something useful in there. If you did, please give the video a like and consider subscribing to the channel. And otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.